Now, should video games be sold with expiry dates on them? Because they do expire. Games are transmitted now from servers that belong to the game's developers. They can stop transmission, so kill a game off anytime they like. They usually only do it when a game isn't played much or when it's been overtaken by a sequel, but they decide. And recently a game called The Crew, made by a French company, Ubisoft, was deleted despite the fact that 12 million people were still playing that game. Now, a lot of gamers think that the whole thing is basically unfair. Ross Scott has founded a campaign to try to stop it. It's called Stop Killing Games Campaign. And Shay Thompson is a gaming expert and presenter. Shay, tell us in simple terms, would you, how the game developers can kill a game off?
Well, it would be like having your favorite movie on Netflix. And, to be fair, this actually does happen a lot where you're like, okay, cool, this is my comfort movie. I'm going to keep watching it every weekend. And then all of a sudden it's been pulled and then there is no way for you to watch it on one streaming platform or another. Like it is just completely gone from the internet. And it's not even like you can go and buy a backup copy like from CEX or anything. It is completely wiped. And so, yeah, that's a massive deal from like an enjoyment perspective, but also for the longevity of the medium.
Shay, they can even shut down a game, can't they, that you have bought on a disc? How?
Yes, yeah. So this happened to me. I was a big fan of the franchise Overwatch. I haven't been able to play the sequel, which came out very recently, because it's on the PS5. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to go and play Overwatch 1. I have the disc. I have the physical edition. Went to put it in my PS4, but as it turns out, the servers for that have been shut down about a year and a half ago or so. So yeah, this is a physical disc that I have that I can no longer play because the servers no longer exist.
Shay, why are they killing so many games? I mean, are they expensive to keep transmitting something, particularly if the number of players falls away?
Oh, as you mentioned, yeah, like there are a couple of reasons as to why it happens. It can be really expensive. Sometimes there are sequels coming out. Sometimes there is just a disappointing lack of sales. That happened with a game called Lawbreakers a couple of years ago. But sometimes it can just be, I hate to say it, but it can just be corporate and shareholder greed. They decide that, okay, we're going to focus our efforts into another project in the company and kind of take focus away from a specific title. And yeah, that ends up impacting the servers on a specific game.
Ross Scott, you started this campaign I mentioned, Stop Killing Games. Why is it so important to you?
Oh, well, I see games as kind of like an art form or a creative work. So to me, it's the same as if somebody were to go into a museum and set fire to paintings. I just hate it from a creative perspective, just has innate value to me.
You set up this petition on the government's website and you got over 10,000 signatures. That is the threshold you need to get a response from the government. In fact, nearly 30,000 people have signed your petition so far. Now, the government said there's no legal requirement for companies to support older versions of any kind of software. So is that any legal battle over it?
No, in fact, I think that was a misunderstanding of what we were asking. We weren't asking for... We want companies to feel free to end support whenever they want. It's just we want the ending of that support to be done in a responsible way. Like for games, like there was a game recently called Knockout City where they had to shut down, but then they modified the game so people could continue running it without their support anymore. And unfortunately, that's the exception rather than the rule.
So the government also told us that companies selling games must provide clear information and allow continued access to games if they're sold on the understanding that they will remain playable indefinitely. I mean, might they ever do that, do you think? Put an expiry date on a game? I mean, it wouldn't help them with sales, would it?
Oh, no. In fact, I think it's very deliberately that information is left out because the majority of video games can work indefinitely. It's only a minority of these that can just be turned off at any moment. So they'd like to sell these side by side with the ones, and there can be some customer confusion as to which ones are going to last and which ones aren't. Whereas if there was a hard expiry date on it, then that would clear everything up and probably would depress sales.
Shay, is there a compromise option here? A way the game developers could allow individuals to carry on playing games that they are no longer interested in streaming from their servers?
Yeah, I think a model like Ross mentioned, Knockout City, which was a game that had a very like small but cult following. So when they announced that they were shutting down the servers from that, there was a lot of backlash, which led to them making that decision. I think a compromise like that could absolutely work, where there isn't long-term support, as in like new content being added, but the game is still like playable in some respect. I think that could work. But I think also, it wouldn't hurt to have the government actually pay more attention to games, as Ross mentioned as well. It is a creative art form. It is a creative medium. It is art. And there is no reason that our government shouldn't know more about it in order to properly consult and, eventually regulate this area.
Ross, what is it that you want the government to do? You said that they had misunderstood your intention, that you didn't want them to force all games developers to keep the games being, broadcast forever. What is it that you want from them?
Well, the main goal would be to kind of prohibit leaving the game in a completely unplayable state when they end support. And also another aspect is they prevent repair too, because there's a lot of countermeasures to prevent any tampering, which makes sense while they're supporting it, but then afterwards it ensures its death. So that would be the ideal solution, is just basically prohibit this, saying there has to be something done let customers they've sold the game to can continue to keep it or run it. Barring that, a sort of fallback goal would be the expiration date, because again, I think that would the cost on this for companies does not have to be high at all. And I think they would lose less money having an end of life plan for these games and having that expiration date on it. But then barring that, I'd at least like a clear definition under the law how these games are governed, because it's not even clear if these games are considered goods or services, because if they're goods, you're being deprived of what you've bought. And if they're services, well, then you're being given no information about this. Like Shay mentioned Netflix. Well, Netflix tells you exactly when your subscription ends, 30 days or a year or whatever. You don't even get that from these games. It's just, it's like the worst of both worlds.
You do get some warning, don't you, Ross, that a game is no longer going to be available to you?
3 months usually before it happens is the tip. But when you buy it, all it says in the license agreement is this can end at any time.
But do you think people buying games realise that? I mean, they don't, do they? Or do they? I don't know.
Well, I think probably a fair amount do. I think most people don't even think about it. They just, because again, these are sold right alongside ones that work forever. I mean, they're online internet games from the 90s that still work today, even if the companies no longer exist. So it's kind of a minefield.
Shay, where does all this fit in with the general picture of what's happening in the gaming sector? Because there are a lot of job losses, aren't there, on gaming developers?
Yeah, it's a lot of job losses. And this kind of goes back into what I was saying about corporate and shareholder greed. We're seeing record profits being made by these companies, but at the same time, jobs are being lost left, right, and centre. Since the start of this year alone, 10,000 jobs have been lost across the gaming sector, which is just unfathomable. But all of this money is being made, and yet it is not being put towards wages or the longevity or the long-term support for these games. So I think as well, like, not so much the developers, because, they are just one cog in the machine. I think it is a step above that, and it goes back into the shareholders and the corporate people at the top, to kind of stop devaluing both the people making the games who work so hard, but also the people who love games, the people that have been playing games their whole lives, like myself and Ross.
Ross, what's the situation now then with your petition? You've got to put a question to the government. You have to reach another goal, don't you, if you want to have it discussed in Parliament?
Oh, well, that's been flipped upside down, because I think a week or two ago, we received a notice that the Petitions Committee considered the government's response inadequate, and they were requesting a new reply. And then shortly after that, we got news of the new elections, and now all the petitions have shut down or locked. So we're probably not going to get that revised reply. It's unclear to me if we can resubmit the same petition later, or if we can't, then what we may do is focus specifically on that expiration date because there seem to be more provisions in UK law that's more clearly defined. It's the consumer protection from unfair trading regulations.
Okay, we'll see what happens. That was Ross Scott, founder of Stop Killing Games campaign, and Shay Thompson.